I'm Dami, and in today's episode, we are joined again by Afshin Attari, the Senior Director of Public Sector and Unified Platforms at Exponential-e. Afshin joined us at the recent Government Data Summit and hosted the discussion on service improvement. Today, Afshin and I will revisit this topic, and we will discuss how government organizations can both improve and transform their service delivery, support better outcomes for citizens, and tackle oncoming challenges in terms of cost and efficiency. Let's jump in now. We are joined again by Afshin Attari, the Senior Director of Public Sector and Unified Platforms at Exponential-e. Afshin joined us at the recent Government Data Summit and hosted a discussion on service improvement. So Afshin, I appreciate you've been on the podcast before, but for the benefit of myself and any new audience members, could you please reintroduce yourself?
Sure, and thank you, Dami. Afshin Attari, I'm the Director of Public Sector and Unified Platforms within Exponential-e, and I'm part of the executive leadership team here at Exponential-e. Fundamentally, I'm responsible for our public sector business, our public sector strategy, and part of that is delivering a good service into our government customers.
So, of course, you co-hosted a discussion around service improvement at the Government Data Summit recently. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about this topic and the insights you shared/heard at the discussion table. But before we dig into this interview, I'd like to start with some softer bits to learn more about you and your background.
Sure.
So to start with, could you tell me what your favorite type of technology is, or your favorite piece of technology is, and why?
I would say my favorite piece of technology now is an electric car that I have, which really is bringing the advent of digital technology applications into the automotive world, and it's helping our climate and our planet. So I think it's an amazing piece, and I've been using an electric car for 2 years now. We have 2 electric cars in the family, and we're big supporters. So I would say it's really been a disruptive change in the automotive industry and digital technology.
Absolutely. Which make is it, by the way? I'm thinking Tesla. I know that might not be the one, but that's the one that always comes to mind.
It's an Audi e-tron, actually. So I would say,
okay.
Yeah, it's a marrying of the comfort and the luxury of the German maker with the new ways of technology. So it's very, very good, and we're very pleased with it.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And then could you tell us a little bit more about your current role and how you're working with the public sector?
Sure. So my responsibility as it is to support serving government in the various segments of government, be it central, health, education, or local government. And our objective as a technology service provider is to bring about digital change, as you would see in the screen in the background, in supporting digital outcomes. And what we hope to do is, by all means, we're not experts in policy or government, but we are fairly competent in taking the complexities of digital adoption of technologies away from the authorities that we work with. So we try to partner with authorities, we try to understand what they are hoping to achieve, if it's a health environment, for example, and creating better pathways for serving patients, or if it's working with central and local government and delivering better outcomes and supporting citizens in their interactions with central and local government, or if it's education and how students enjoy a better environment using technology in that environment. We step in and try to sort of take that those complexities away, and advise what is entirely possible, and hopefully try to demonstrate different ways of working, different working practices, agile ways of working, which will really fundamentally delivers better experiences and lower cost. So that's what we tend to focus on. And the heart of our business is centered around customer service. So customer service, supporting that customer service, delivering better customer service is at the heart of our principles within Exponential-e. We measure that through our Net Promoter Score. So if you visit our website, you'll see that we are one of the very few organizations which tracks, measures, and reports on the Net Promoter Score, what is a customer satisfaction metrics which we are very proud of.
Yes, thank you so much for explaining that to me. I hadn't heard of a Net Promoter Score, so I'll definitely look
Cool.
into that a little bit later. So more generally, could you tell me some of your main takes on the way government organizations are currently tackling improving their services? So of course, you talked about a range of sectors there. Maybe we could use education, for example.
So what we're seeing in the education sector is a big investment around technology to improve, for example, higher and further education campuses. Because the students are more tech savvy, they are much more demanding around the technology they use. So the infrastructure they connect to in a campus is becoming very important. As you know, if you've got a teenager like I have, the very first thing they ask in any environment is, do you have Wi-Fi? So Wi-Fi and activity is a peak point. So there's a big investment around technology and investment and renewing campuses. The second point is around delivering and enhancing the ability for students to work and study remotely when they want to sort of interact with the university. Around content, around lectures, around accessing research material. And around that, with digital technology, there's always a risk around security. So hardening, understanding, and ensuring that that engagement is secure is another big piece of activity. And thirdly, a piece which is common to most government authorities is how cloud technologies or consumption models can be utilized to deliver flexibility around managing demand, paying for those services on a consumption model, and actually speeding up processes, which is very common. So that's what we're seeing in the education sector.
Great, thank you. We might dig into this a little bit further. So in terms of how they can improve performance and capability in this area, could you maybe identify a few things that they could start with? So we obviously talked about having better access to Wi-Fi, for example. Wi-Fi is definitely everywhere. It's something people are basically expecting to be set up in place. So is there a particular instance or project you've worked on that has involved making sure that the campus, for example, has a strong enough Wi-Fi network that covers every area? Or is there something around cloud services, making sure that they can access their files from different business, different buildings on campus?
So Middlesex University is a key customer for us, of which we provide a lot of their compute platform around cloud. They've been with us for circa 6 years, and we've helped them through that journey over the 6-year period. We have other engagements in play with other universities, for example, where we've delivered Teams calling, which is a way of communication, of unified communications that we're seeing being adopted widely across government. But at the heart of our activity, as I mentioned, it's delivering better experiences. So when you talk about Wi-Fi, if you walk into a library and the Wi-Fi coverage is not good, or the speed of connectivity is poor, that's not a good experience. If you are a research student and you want to do computations on a environment where your research is dependent on compute and the speed of response is slow, that's not a good experience. So we are predominantly focusing on enabling investment in infrastructure, securing that infrastructure, and ensuring that that infrastructure delivers a good experience, be it in, as I mentioned, in education, health, local government, and central government. And we have other examples that I can talk about in the health sector, which really is focusing on patients other than students. Again, same challenges, but different outcomes.
Could we dig into what their challenges might look like and how this differs slightly, obviously, because it's a completely different sector? Maybe they have some of the same overall challenges in terms of connectivity, but is there maybe a use case that we could talk about specifically that would relate to healthcare?
So in the case of, if you look at it from a very low-level perspective or simplistic perspective, we connect and protect 3/5 of London. What does that mean? If you go into Northwest London, Southwest London, or Southeast London, any GP, any hospital, in that environment is connected through the Exponential-e network. So we provide with them the health and social care network connectivity. That's been in play for 4 years now. We picked up that contract. And good examples are previously, if you could go into a GP which was not connected to a high-speed connection, which is a fiber connection, they could be on ADSL. They could be sitting there 45 minutes just logging into the electronic patient record systems, which is not a good experience. So that's from an infrastructure perspective. Other experiences in health we provide on support Ministry of Justice and the Prison Service in delivering telemedicine into 133 prisons. So on the back of COVID, what you would see is prisoners and inmates and also in correction centres needed to be treated through the hospital visits, but you can see it's a very risky environment. If you take an inmate or a prisoner or a young offender out of that environment into a hospital environment, which potentially has a high risk of COVID, if they're infected, they come back to that secure environment. That transfer could be risky from a health perspective, but equally it's not efficient because every time you transport someone, it's the transportation cost, it's the supporting guards which need to go with them, etc., etc. And also from a human factor, we've had some feedback that those individuals in certain times would find it demeaning. If you're moving into a hospital with handcuffs on your hands, that's not a good experience. So what we did is we worked with Department of Health and the Prison Service to enable the possibility for clinicians to go into hospitals. And the key determining factor for them was when they're in that environment to be able to access patient records. So if you're treating someone and you're sitting in that environment, you need to be able to connect to their records, understand what their health history is, to be able to give them good, sound advice. So we've helped deploy ruggedized laptops, because you can understand we're in a prison environment, the laptops need to be secure, the SIM cards need to be locked, the accessibility on that machine needs to be secure because you don't want unauthorized access. The method of communication back into the patient records had to be secure, so we developed a solution where we would we've created a remote access solution which has got a separate key which authenticates the user. So through that deployment, what we have heard is that there's been a great feedback around that technology. So in real terms, it's helped deliver a better experience for the prisoner. It's actually much more efficient because what you don't do is you're not transferring prisoners from location A to location B, which means tying up transportation and prison guards. And lastly, it's actually approaching the problem in a different way. So it's using digital technologies to solve a problem which has been there for a period of time, but rethinking it. So that's another example that we can see in the health service. And one other example that I can give you is we're working with the pathology cooperative led by Leeds Teaching Hospital, where we are hosting and providing the cloud pathology capability to store images for pathology. So in real terms, if you look at it, traditionally what you would do is you would have an image taken and then transported from A to B through physical means. The new platform allows for that images to be taken, shared with consultants and advisors, which supports the multidisciplinary teams environment through accessing that information. And if you take it a step further with the collation of all these images in a digital format, you can actually look at the use of artificial intelligence to do some investigation of those images to look at trending and help diagnosis. So that's where, again, technology is coming into play, and we're working with the pathology cooperative led by Leeds Teaching Hospital.
So for an organization that's maybe starting on their service improvement journey that doesn't necessarily have any new technology, or maybe they have technical debt from like legacy systems, are there maybe 2 or 3 things that they should prioritize, or things that they can kind of turn into quick wins that will help with the overall transformation journey?
I think the advice would be to, before you get into the finer detail of technology, is look at the processes and look at the journeys that you want to adopt within that organization, be it a patient, be it a citizen, be it an employee. So look at your process mapping and the touch points, and then look at how that process can be digitized with new ways of working. Because fundamentally what you find majority of the time is that when you try to digitize an analog process, it costs a lot of money. But if you focus on the desired outcome and think about a different approach, you can actually achieve a better outcome at lower cost with better experiences. So what the advice I would give is focus on the processes. Look at the relevancy of those processes in delivering a better service, validate those. And once that's done and you're comfortable with those, then try to sort of think about how you can bring technology to support an agile adoption of those processes in that environment.
Some very useful, actionable tips there. So just coming back to the Government Data Summit and around the discussion tables, could you share with us something that you shared on the discussion table that was well received, or maybe something that other people have had issues with that you were able to find a solution for?
I think one point which was very clear, which comes back to my earlier point, is naturally, because government is a very long-standing establishment, it is driven by policies. Like any institution, what you find is some of the policies and some of the processes which are in play are not relevant for our current day-to-day challenges. And secondly, they're not relevant to the current day-to-day audiences. So if you look at what I mean audiences is, if you look at the new generation, they're more tech savvy. Their experiences of use of technology is much more forward thinking. So what we see is, coming back to my previous point, is revisiting and relooking at that policy and understanding the relevancy of that policy. And that was a common theme that you would see coming on the table from different entities, from central governments, from local governments, and education establishments as well. I think there was a sense of frustration. We've always done it that way. Why do we still have to do it that way? So that's something that which came across. The second point is, if you look at the challenges, the authority may differ, but the type of challenge that they're seeing seems to be common. So if you think about the opportunity of sharing, it seems like there could be an opportunity of creating digital blueprints, which I know the Cabinet Office is trying to establish, where they can provide those blueprints and support authorities and entities which are going through that change or planning to go through that change. Because if you try to reinvent the wheel over and over again, we can be sure that the wheel that you invent is going to feel and look different to the other wheel. So, and if you can replicate experiences, good and bad, and understand those and create blueprints, then there's an opportunity for that to come into play. The third point, which is very pertinent that we see, is that with advent of technology and complexity, there is a big demand for talent and capability. And what we see in our market, in the technology market, is there's a skills shortage around capable, knowledgeable resource. And I think what the government authorities were finding slightly difficult is that, as service providers, Our main profession, if you can argue, is technology. We at times struggle to identify, recruit and retain talent. But if you're a government authority and that's not your main profession, the attractiveness of the authorities to these individuals is fairly low. And secondly, if you look at the remuneration, sometimes the remuneration alignment within government doesn't allow for that competitive market. So the accessing of talent, suitable talent to bring about change, is another theme that was very common on the discussion table.
On that topic, is there anything that was really surprising that you heard during the conversations at your discussion table or at the wider conference that you were like, oh my goodness, I didn't even think of this. Like, this is a really big thing that you've maybe taken back to action or to kind of start a new plan around? Were there any new areas that were raised, that something maybe Exponentially hasn't really covered yet, or something they're looking to cover in the future?
I wouldn't say anything surprising as such, but I think the key benefit for us as technologists is good to engage with our customers and understand what their challenges are. So every time I have a conversation with a different entity, different organization in a different environment, it's very informative for us because it allows us to modify our behaviors around how we design, how we implement, and how we support a service for that customer or that client in question. And every engagement is enlightening for us. So that's what we try to invest heavily in Exponential-e, is really understanding the environment, the customer, and their operational needs to make sure that what we recommend meets their business and operational and financial objectives. So that was the informative section of discussion with the different entities.
Okay, and then looking ahead to what you think the biggest challenges might be facing government around this issue, was that brought up at the discussion table at all? Is it something that Exponentially is looking to kind of follow up with a little bit later? Or is there anything that maybe wasn't covered that you wish you could have covered at the discussion table that we can kind of broach a little bit today?
I think the challenge, if I look at the market, if I look at the environment, and if I look at the discussion, is one around cost management. So if you think about, there's a big challenge around funding, which is very commonly discussed. The funding to support the government can only come through two ways. One is around taxation, and the second is around reducing costs. So that was a big factor in the discussion points, because every entity that you speak to requires more funding to bring about that change. So that's something which I think is I guess, keeping the CDIOs, which is the Chief Digital Information Officers, and the seniors awake at night, and which needs to map out. So how's the funding going to work, et cetera, et cetera. The opportunity around that is around bringing about agile ways of working, as I mentioned earlier, and looking at the processes and saying, can we deliver the better outcomes, but do it in a different way? And that necessarily doesn't mean more money. It means doing it and approaching the problem in a different dynamic. So we talked about the electric car earlier on. If you just look at that, an electric car is an automotive vehicle which transports passengers from A to B. Traditionally, it's been done by a combustion engine for many years, but now what it's done is it's 90% electronics and there's no combustion in there. It's actually delivering better outcomes. Okay, the cost of the vehicle needs to come down to make it more affordable, but it's supporting a greener agenda on our planet. So the question is, how can that be achieved in an ever demanding population base which is aging, which requires services, be it in health, social care, education, and also in the criminal justice arena. I think that's where the opportunity is, and I think some investments and some thinking in that area would be beneficial. And the other aspect that is interesting is that we see a lot of capable senior appointees within government who have worked in the commercial sector as part of their career coming in and supporting that change. So I think the embracing that need, hiring capable, knowledgeable, and ambitious and talented individuals into the authorities is supporting that. But I think certainly the funding challenge in the future, as it settles, because we still are unclear on what that is going to cause some thought amongst all entities.
There's definitely a lot to kind of unpack there. So just lastly, do you have any lasting advice for government participants from your discussion table, or just wider people that you spoke to at the conference? Is there anything that you maybe would like to note or highlight?
From a service provider perspective, what we've seen work well is pre-engagement and engaging with the service provider community to help explain and understand the art of the possible. I understand there is obligations for procurement, and I understand there is obligations around delivering best value. But I think one of the areas which could do with some focus is thinking how that best value could be achieved without foregoing the knowledge that a service provider can provide. If I come back to the car analogy, what you want is you want someone who drives the car to come and talk about the experience they want to hold around the type of car they want to buy, the speed, acceleration, comfort, other aspects. What you don't want is the customer to come and tell you, I want 4 wheels, I want the chassis to be that, I want that, etc., etc. So I think that, and with complexities of transformational projects, which entails digital support and engagement, it's always good to consult with the experts for advice to help shape form the requirements, which fundamentally should be not around the fine design aspects, but the desired outcomes. I think that would be useful. So early engagement, seeking input, understanding the perspective of what is possible is beneficial. And the other aspect that we as service providers see is that because of the nature of our role, we engage with many authorities, with many projects over a period of 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. So naturally, we are more sort of aware of the type of operational needs across multiple authorities. If you're a single authority procuring one service which has not been changed for over 10 years, you would not have those experiences. So as I said, there is an obligation for best value, there's an obligation to protect the public purse, but equally there's an opportunity to call upon the market and trusted advisors to help you solve that problem, because we collectively have a vested interest. This is what we focus on Exponential. We have a vested interest in supporting our government to deliver better outcomes for our citizens, because we ourselves are patients and citizens of this service. So that's where the marrying of the commercial world and the public sector world comes together. And we're very proud of what we do.
Thank you so much. And thank you for answering all my questions. I think that's my last one. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with our civil service community?
No, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Afshin. Thanks again to Afshin Attari, Senior Director of Public Sector and Unified Platforms for Exponential-e, for joining me on this discussion on the Government Transformation Show to talk about service improvement. Really appreciate your time, Afshin. I'd love to speak to you again soon.
Thank you, Dami. It was a pleasure speaking to you, and speak to you soon. Thank you.
Cheers. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks again to Afshin for joining me on this episode. There was a great conversation there around the many moving pieces needed to deliver better outcomes for citizens, the various applications for technology, and how this can improve and encourage more efficient service delivery and better citizen satisfaction. Join us next time where we'll be sitting with another public sector changemaker. Until then, goodbye.